So before I actually start the video, I do want to say one thing. I have played Pokemon before. I played Platinum, Black, Black 2, and X, but I skipped Generation 7 as well as the Generation 3 remakes. So I'm not an outsider in the sense that I've never played a game before. I'm more of an outsider in the sense that I never ever interact with the community ever. And now with that out of the way, let's get into the actual video. So one thing that really seemed to ruffle people's feathers, so to speak, was the whole, I believe it's been dubbed Dexit now, where basically just not all 800 or whatever Pokemon there are now aren't necessarily in the game. There's only the ones that the developers decided to put in, and honestly, as a casual, that actually makes perfect sense, because there's much less of them you have to keep track of. You don't have to try to memorize more than 800. Granted, you still got to do about, 400? But that's not near as bad. I can barely remember like half of the original 151. You expect me to be able to remember more than 800? Not to mention the fact that the only way you'd even be able to get all 800 without, cheating would be basically you've been playing since the beginning, have been migrating every time there's a new game that comes out, and not necessarily a whole lot of people have really done that anymore, especially people like me who maybe used to play but then kind of stopped. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I started at Gen 4, and after Gen 6 I quit. And to be honest, the only reason I even picked up Gen 8 was because a lot of people that I know were saying, this is actually pretty fun if you weren't too fond of Pokemon. You quit it, you put it down or whatever, you might actually have fun with this one. That, and I may or may not have had a coupon for 50% off any Switch game I wanted. So I decided to use it on that, and it actually was pretty fun, but I did have some issues with it, but none of them were really deal breakers or anything. I'll touch on that later, but honestly, with regard to the whole Dexit thing, I think it's just kind of stupid. The only people that really seemed to actually be upset with it were more of the hardcore competitive types. But for somebody like me who's just going to play the game for fun anyway, it's really not that big a deal. On the subject of competitive, one thing that I saw people complain about with the whole Let's Go thing was that the, I believe, EV/IV training or whatever the heck that is, wasn't a thing in the Let's Go games, which, again, that one was designed to be casual. I think that one, the whole point of Let's Go was to try to bridge frickin' Pokemon Go players to mainline. So that, didn't really bother me, but the whole EV/IV training thing, I understand, how it works. At the same time, I kind of don't. I understand, how it works as far as, you want certain stats to get certain, levels and whatnot, but at the same time, I don't understand how people can expect me to memorize how, 800 something now? How each of them interact with different Pokemon, as far as, because if you kill certain ones, it gives off certain things that make certain stats raise better, and it's just confusing. No matter how it's explained to me, no matter who tries to explain it to me, I just can't seem to understand. Call me stupid, call me slow-witted, whatever, I don't care. I'm never going to interact with the competitive community anyway, because let's face it, it is still more toxic than Fukushima and Chernobyl combined. Honestly, though, I understand why some people might want to do it, because, there's competitive everything now. I mean, pretty much every game's got some kind of competitive community, even if it's a single-player game. That's what speedrunners are for now, right? But honestly, the whole EV/IV thing, like I said, I understand it, but at the same time, I don't. I understand, how it works. I just don't understand how you can expect somebody to memorize the names, types, stat ranges, and what stat they give off when killed for more than 800 of these, Pokemon. Granted, in Sword Shield, you only have to worry about 400 of them, but at the same time, it's how on earth can you expect somebody to memorize all that? I can barely keep track of maybe half of the original 151. You expect me to be able to do more than 800 or 400, depending on, your take? No, that's just not happening. I don't know. I just don't know. And with a terrible, terrible segue, there were some issues I had with the game. Obviously, one thing that seems to bother a lot of people every time is the story, because let's face it, it's Pokemon. It's not exactly known for its riveting story. They definitely tried to go away from more of the tropey stuff this time with actually the post-game story being one of the better ones at least out of the Pokemon games I played. Sword Shield's post-game story was actually pretty well done, comparatively. But as per usual, though, the story's kind of, linear. It's predictable. It's Pokemon. What do you expect? Another couple issues was I at least was having a lot of frame skipping, especially in the wild area. I think that's something a lot of people were complaining about, was like frame skipping and whatnot, but that might have also been my connection, because I, like an idiot, decided I was going to play it online, or at least be connected to the internet, and that probably is what was slowing me down. Another issue that I have is that a lot of the moves, don't really have the best animation to them, which, doesn't necessarily bother most people, but after they said they wanted to work on the animations and stuff, it's still kind of disappointing to have most attacks just be the Pokemon moves on the X, Y, or Z axis while continuing its static, idle animation and maybe adding some particle effects around it. Whereas, more special moves, like some of the ones the starters get, as well as one of the legendaries moves, got to actually be like properly animated attacks, whereas everything else is just kind of static. Maybe they'll move their arm forward or like do a kick instead of just doing the static idle animation while moving on the XYZ axis, but most of them really don't, and it's kind of noticeable. Honestly, the only reason I noticed was because that was one of the things that really bugged me about XY, because with XY, full 3D, so I admittedly thought it was going to kind of be like Pokemon Stadium or Battle Revolution, where there were actual animations for each attack and whatnot, only to be completely disappointed. I think a lot of people were kind of bummed at that for Sword Shield, but honestly, because I'm just kind of playing casually, I'm just kind of playing for fun, I'm not really taking the game too seriously, it's not a deal breaker, but it definitely is noticeable. It's not really going to bug me too much, though, because that's not really what I'm worried about. It is still pretty noticeable. Once you see it, you can't unsee it, is kind of my point. As far as other issues, I didn't really actually have too many other issues, although it was a little disappointing. The render distance on some things, you would have to get pretty close to trees or NPCs before they'd actually render in, and if you got far enough away to where in say Breath of the Wild you'd still be able to see them, they just disappear, straight up just Thanos snapped away or something. That I didn't really pay too much attention to until I obscurely noticed it while I was playing. Got a little confused and then figured out that was a thing for the entire game. I don't really have too much else in the way of issues. I actually had a lot of fun playing Sword Shield. I wasn't expecting much going in because I was super disappointed with XY. I really did not like XY. I can't really put together reasons why. I just really didn't like it. But this was actually a lot of fun. I actually had a lot of fun playing this, which granted is the point of a game, which makes it that much better that it actually was fun, because it means it was worth the money, right? No, but long story longer, there are some issues, like the kind of lackluster animations and whatnot, but they're not really deal breakers because I'm just kind of playing casually. I don't really care. I'm not taking the game too seriously. I'm just here to make jokes and maybe do some stupid crap along the way, but yeah, that's really it as far as I'm concerned. Of course, though, the last thing that I wanted to touch on is, of course, the community. I'm going to touch on this in a later video that I'm for now titling Community is Great, except when it isn't. Because honestly, the Pokemon community, in my experience, is one of gaming's worst communities out there. It is by far and away one of the most hostile and unwelcoming communities for people. Honestly, if you're just going to be a casual play for fun, you're probably not going to interact with the community too much anyway, but the times you do, it's probably not going to be too bad. Try to go to the competitive side, however, and honestly, you think League of Legends or Overwatch is bad? You should see some of the shit competitive Pokemon people say, oh my god. I don't get offended by anything, and even some of the stuff that they say I have an issue with, which is saying a lot, by the way. The worst part about any game or anything really is the community, because there's always going to be that one schmuck that does something stupid, goes around trying to, gas pedal people just to piss them off. Unfortunately, though, at least from what I've been able to gather, the bigger the community or more well-known the community, the more of those people tend to pop up and stick around, whereas smaller, more niche communities don't really have too many of those people, and at least in my experience, those kind of people tend to get purged in smaller, more niche communities because everybody just kind of looks at them like they're some kind of, weirdo for thinking that kind of behavior is okay, which it never really is. I'm not one to say, everybody needs to be nice to each other, because let's face it, that's never going to happen, but at least have some decency. Honestly, people in a lot of communities, especially ones that are infamously toxic, I believe is the word that gets thrown around. A lot of them tend to wonder what the problem is. Why are people calling us this? But then they turn around and pull stuff like that. And honestly, at least in my experience anyway, the Pokemon community is easily one of the worst. I remember when I was first trying to learn what the whole Eevee Ivy thing was, and I had an entire forum basically calling me every name under the sun because I had never heard of it before, even though my very first Pokemon game was Gen 4. I was completely new to Pokemon as a game at the time. So it was just, looking back on it, was actually kind of funny because I'm sure those people are still doing the same old thing. So, honestly, overall, my thoughts on Gen 8, it was a lot of fun. I had fun with it. There were certainly its issues, and the community is still complete garbage in my opinion, and honestly, most communities are, so that's really not too much of an issue for most people. Because I don't really have a better ending to this video, I'm just gonna kind of cut.